the crossing analyses of the IT industry and international relations. Welcome to the Tech Geopolitics Unveiled. I'm Rocky Urian-Kai. Today I'm going to talk about what I thought of after witnessing a war breaking out. As you all know, on October 7th, Saturday, in the Gaza Strip area of southern Israel, the armed group Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel. Do note that this attack was not launched by the entire Palestinian regime. Therefore, it's not exactly accurate to call this an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. However, the conflict between Israel and Palestine has been going on for nearly half a century. From the time I started watching the news on TV when I was an elementary school student, I knew there was this unsolvable powder keg in the Middle East, so we'll call it that for now. Also, I want to make it clear, I'm not doing this because it's a hot news topic. It's because this incident has everything to do with the semiconductor industry and Taiwan. I'll start with Taiwan. However, first, a short promotion. The IT industry is changing rapidly. How can we grasp the most accurate and important information in the shortest time? DigiTimes is the world's most professional Chinese IT industry newspaper. DigiTimes launched the mobile version of DigiTimes to help readers acquire first-hand industry information anytime and anywhere. Check out the video description below for more information about the mobile version of DigiTimes. On January 26, 2021, Bloomberg published an article titled, "The World is Dangerously Dependent on Taiwan for Semiconductors." Less than 3 months later, on April 16th, Nikkei's Chinese website also published an article titled, "The Risk of Global Overdependence on TSMC is Increasing." Do note that the danger or risk they mentioned here is global, not Taiwan. Then on May 21st, the British magazine The Economist published a cover story that caused extensive discussion, "The Most Dangerous Place on Earth," but it was referring to Taiwan. This is because of the cover art, which was an eerie radar green light sweeping across Taiwan and a little bit of Fujian. In the middle of the strait, there's also a 5-star flag, as well as dots that are likely marking the planes and vessels of the PLA. The dots were present on both the east and west sides of Taiwan. The Economist's argument was that because Taiwan produces more than 90% of the world's high-end chips, the PLA could attack Taiwan in the event of a war in the Taiwan Strait, and blah, blah, blah. Even when I first read this back then, I had doubts. Was Taiwan really that dangerous? When the incident on October 7th broke out, I immediately thought of this article. See, there are other places where war is more likely to occur and more dangerous than Taiwan. Anyway, we are not here to compare the two. No matter what, we hope here that this conflict can end as soon as possible and casualties can be minimized as much as possible. So, what does this so-called Israeli-Palestinian conflict have to do with the technology industry? If you are someone who is following the global semiconductor industry, you will know that apart from the 6 semiconductor powers of the United States, Europe, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and China, Israel is also a special existence in the global semiconductor industry. Its production capacity is much smaller than the Big 6 mentioned above, and is even much smaller than Singapore's, a country we previously talked about. However, the number of startups, compared to its population of less than 10 million, is very, very high. It has more than 7,000 startups, meaning that for every 400 to 500 people, there's a new company. Of course, these startups are not all in the semiconductor industry. They also include AI, communications, self-driving cars, and many more. If Taiwan is to have the same population to startup ratio, that's more than 15,000 startups. Moreover, Israel's startup industry views Silicon Valley as its hinterland. Its culture is also much more in line with Silicon Valley's. An upperclassman of mine at NTU, Nanlei Wang, spent most of his life working in Silicon Valley. He once lamented that he sometimes couldn't tell the difference between Israel and Silicon Valley. Huh? Why would he lament? Because Wang has also been closely following Taiwan's startups. He believes that startups established by Taiwan's young people, these are his exact words, don't have the same vision and momentum as Israel's. Their structures are also much smaller. This makes it difficult to attract Silicon Valley investments, which makes it difficult to enter the global market. Well, we all hope that Taiwan's young students can all fight on. Now back to Israel. In addition to tech talents being very willing to start new businesses, Israel's national laws and regulations in terms of company shareholding structure, forex control, and other aspects also allow US companies to rest assured when they conduct M&As. Moreover, Israeli talents also don't view being publicly listed as their sole objective. Often they are more than happy to let a large foreign entity acquire them when they're just on the verge of breaking through and have yet to produce any results. Then they will just go ahead and start up another company. You may want to ask, how did this kind of startup culture come about? In 2009, there was a US bestseller called Startup Nation, the story of Israel's economic miracle. It especially highlighted the many reasons for Israel's high number of startups, many of which have to do with factors stemming from traditional Jewish culture. For example, the Jewish slang, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, shows that they encourage children to express their ideas and seek consensus or conclusions through communication and debate. For more basic information about the country of Israel and its technology industry, please check out another DigiTimes program. Today I'll be citing a picture from a DigiTimes article on the semiconductor supply chain in Israel. Let's take a look. We can see that in Israel there are 4 major international semiconductor companies: Samsung Next, Qualcomm, Nvidia, and US industry leader Intel. These sites are mainly RMD units, while Intel has 2 wafer fabs on top of an RMD unit. In fact, Intel just announced in June that it's building a 3rd fab. So, what's the key point? Have you noticed that Intel has been investing in Israel since 1974? Yet ever since Israel's inception, the armed conflict between it and Palestine, as well as other neighboring Arab countries, has never stopped. The continuation of the war and the efforts made by all parties in pursuit of peace have always gone hand in hand with each other. If so, why didn't Intel and Nvidia back off, but instead have been increasing their investment in Israel for decades? Why doesn't The Economist consider Israel to be the most dangerous place in the world? Of course, there is a simple answer. As we mentioned earlier, Israel's strength lies in R&D innovation, not manufacturing. Even if we count the capacity of those 2 Intel fabs, it's still far from significant on the global chip supply chain. Taiwan is not the same. Taiwan has TSMC, UMC, and PSMC. Their accumulated capacity accounts for more than 20% of the world's capacity. For advanced chips under 10 nm, the percentage was once as high as over 90%. So Taiwan is considered a dangerous place because it is the world's leading producer of chips, especially high-end chips. Is that so? On second thought, that doesn't seem quite right, isn't it? If Taiwan just quietly and honestly produces and supplies the world with chips, that shouldn't be an issue. Even if it is an oligopoly, it's a common phenomenon in the global tech industry. For example, the Netherlands ASML monopolizes the world's EUV and accounts for nearly 90% of high-end EUV production capacity. Yet nobody is calling the Netherlands the most dangerous place on earth. The real difference is that The Economist thinks the PLA will not attack the Netherlands, but may attack Taiwan, right? Therefore, Taiwan shouldn't be called dangerous just because it produces a large quantity of advanced chips. Rather, the danger comes from the military threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party. More importantly, the danger comes from the US feeling a possible threat that it may not be able to buy large quantities of advanced chips. This is the more reasonable way to describe this situation, right? In fact, it's not just me that's saying this. The US has since stopped expressing this concern through the media and instead has been doing so directly through officials. On May 25, 2022, US Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo was interviewed by CNBC at the Summer Davos Forum. Her statement back then was, "The US needs to secure a future for its chip industry." The headlines of the report even directly quoted her thoughts, "downright scary and untenable." 2 months later, on July 22nd, Raimondo herself posted on social media and directly named Taiwan. Her direct quote was, "If you want to be up all night worrying, the US doesn't make any really leading-edge chips. We buy 90% from Taiwan. Our dependence on Taiwan is untenable and unsafe." Simply put, she believes that the US can't produce any cutting-edge chips on its own and that 90% of its chips have to be purchased from Taiwan. This dependence on Taiwan is unsafe and unsustainable, and that fact is keeping her up at night. An official of Raimondo's caliber has a lot of work to do. She doesn't have the time to chit-chat on social media. Therefore, every post she makes has some kind of meaning and purpose behind it. So what happened after she made that post? On December 6, 2022, during the equipment installation ceremony of TSMC's Arizona Fab 21, TSMC also announced that it's upgrading from the previously planned 5nm processes to 4nm processes. Additionally, in 2026, it will further upgrade to 3nm processes. More importantly, the investment value was increased from an original scale of $12 billion to $40 billion. How much is $40 billion US dollars? The cost of a nuclear-powered Ford-class aircraft carrier is merely $14 billion. If $40 billion means 2 of these, each with a full fleet of aircraft, that's a lot of money. Back to the topic, Taiwan itself is not dangerous. While there is the potential danger of an armed attack from the other side of the Taiwan Strait, since Taiwan has the semiconductor industry that the world needs, the world is the one that's truly in danger if this supply is disrupted. In other words, Taiwan is immensely important to the world. What do you think? That's it for today's episode of Tech Geopolitics Unveiled. New episodes of our show will be available once every 2 weeks. Please watch, share, comment, and like the video. I'm Rocky Uriankai. See you next time.